This brings me to the last and final question. And this is where I'd like three key recommendations from all of you. And I'll sort of go one by one. Ratin, if I can start with you, what are your three key recommendations for the budget?
Yeah. Recommendation one, understand the fiscal situation is weak. Understand, as Sangeeta is saying and Sonal is saying, that there's no, and as Pranjul has been saying much more politely than me. But you sit in the Delhi Sultanate, you get fed up with this alternate universe. So that it is not, the competence of the central government as an instrument is limited. There are many things that you can do by just letting the private sector do them. And you should just go ahead and do them. That is recommendation one. And she gave several examples. Just do it. I think there was an ad line about that, right? The trouble, of course, with that is you don't get credit. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but perhaps someone needs to sit with the government and explain to them that credit will come in spades if the private sector does its job to any government that allows it to. You don't have to take credit for everything. We can always put comma inaugurated by the PM. That's okay. But otherwise, general credit may not come. And that's fine. The second recommendation is, this is a great time to do what was left off in 2016. And then when our horrors began in this country with DeMon and GST, we had started off with a program of simplifying the tax system. The question is not tax cuts. Just make the tax system simpler. And this is not about, a Bhopal guy anonymously. That's about trust and corruption. And in India, we're fixated on that. This is about fewer exemptions, more people with same income levels paying the same taxes, irrespective of whether they invest in infra or in petrochemicals or in healthcare or something else. A more simplified two-pager on corporate taxes, a GST system that actually takes a hit, but not by reducing the mean GST rate, but by having fewer rates and more simple methods of compliance. This is not going to happen in the budget, but you asked for my wish list. But I know because no one's even thinking about this. Okay. And my third would be, for God's sake, come up with a medium-term plan to monetize your assets. It is clear to every intelligent economist that this government's fiscal problem in one sentence is typical corporate problem like Mafatlal's and the old companies. Asset rich, income poor. We have textile mills in the middle of Parel, 20, 30 years ago. Their flow income is busted. So what the government's been trying to do, using a lot of rhetoric, is to monetize its assets. It has not found a way to do it effectively because it has not looked at the biggest asset it has, which is land. Land and building. If you can put that at the service of things like low-cost housing, the built environment, industry, etc., and then have an intelligent medium-term plan to divest from the ownership and control of the list of assets that you announced you would like to do in July, about which I've not heard a word till now. If you push the bureaucracy to be less lazy and not, for example, appoint a transactions professionals for LIC on 30th of November, when you've announced the privatization of LIC in the last budget. That's 8 months. You'd be sacked in a company if you took that long. So complete and finish, execute better, simplify the private sector. Don't worry about spending more or taxing less.
Thanks, Ratkin. We hope your good word goes around and it reaches the finance ministry. Even if one of your wish comes true, we can proudly say you heard it first at the ET Markets Global Summit. Coming to you, Dr. Reddy, what are your three key recommendations?
So one of my first ones is, of course, promote social sector spending, so health and education. I think it's critical for us to see a big push into education as well and use this crisis, whether it's digital, e-learning, the entire spectrum, use it, innovate extensively, use the budget to encourage building, not back, don't build back, but build future. My next one is that really investment and productivity improvement can take care of areas like employment generation and therefore create the overall economic growth. So ensure that we're focusing on investment and productivity improvement. And finally, I would say, I have to do one specific call out on healthcare, and that is enhance the allocation for healthcare, but also enable people to take care of their healthcare more. So whether it's ensure a health checkup, so allow exemption for health checkups. That number has not been changed for the last 15 years, I think, in terms of tax exemption for health-related spending. So look at the overall of reimbursement for medical insurance, look at the deductions for health insurance and health checkup spending. All these, so it's overall budget allocation, which should appropriately go to Ayushman Bharat, primary healthcare but allow the middle class also to be able to take care of their own health by enabling it through exemption. Thank you.
Rightly so. A focus on healthcare, and if not now, then when?
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Pranjul, your key recommendations?
Yeah, sure. So look, one is on fiscal, that bring down the fiscal deficit, but don't do it very sharply, do it only gradually in a way that you continue to spend enough on social welfare, vaccine rollout, and all of that. But then do that responsibly through disinvestment, asset monetization, because it's now or never, given that capital markets are in record highs. The second is have a focus on CapEx. It's not just about putting more money out there, but it's also about creating the right environment, get the PLI schemes to work, bring back the IBC into play and all of that. And the third is do no harm. Don't continue to impose all of those import tariffs you've been doing for the last 3 years, because that actually comes up as a big tax on your economy. Don't maintain an environment of uncertainty when it comes to tax policies, and don't ignore the stress in banks, because that can be a huge drag on medium-term growth. So these are my three. I just also wanted to add one point to your last question. Should consumption continue to get a fillip? My sense is that if you really keep giving consumption a fillip at the cost of investment, you get a very disbalanced economy which stokes macro instability, for example, inflation, huge trade deficits, BOP problems, all the problems we have been facing. So be very careful. We have to get that balance right. So, I agree with Sonal there that, unnecessary tax consumption incentives at the cost of investment may not be the greatest idea.
Thanks. So you're putting the fear of not being excessive and being responsible in a sense. Thanks so much. Sonal, you get the last word. From the economist point of view, what are your three key recommendations?
I can just say all of the above, Deepak. But I think on a serious note, first, like I said, more targeted spending, and I would say more front-loaded spending, because the recovery is going to be more back-ended. Second, we didn't talk that much about the financial sector, but clearly that needs a focus, whether the plan is to do a good bank, bad bank, recapitalization, but extremely essential for funding our future growth. Third, I think on the competition side, the production linked incentive scheme is obviously via more incentives right now, but I think we need to now start focusing on how to make our sectors more competitive. So maybe not in the budget necessarily, but we need to do some kind of a sectoral regulatory scorecard where we benchmark sectors against global benchmarks in terms of being competitive. I think that's extremely important going forward. And finally, if you allow me, just one more, infrastructure, everybody talked about it, completely agree with that. I think the points that, Ratan was mentioning and even Swami mentioned, how do we focus better on execution, something we can monitor in terms of progress rather than just, broad allocation. I think that would bring about more transparency and more confidence that indeed durable growth recovery is probably setting in shape. So just a lot more, of course, on the agenda.
Thanks, Sonal. That's 4 people with 3 each. That's 12 recommendations for Nirmala Sitharaman. We hope she's listening, and we'll surely try to pass the word around. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending your time with us today, giving frank and opinion views. We definitely appreciate candid views, because that's what is needed and that's important. Swami started with all, and you continued the baton. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.